All right. So you're torn between the opportunity of working in AI and the pressure of delivering more, faster, and that brings you close to burnout. In today's episode, we'll talk about burning for AI without burning out. So let's jump right in. So, welcome to What's the Buzz, where leaders and hands-on experts share how they've turned hype into outcome. Today, we'll talk about burning for AI without burning out. And I have somebody on the show who recently posted about this and who's an expert in anything data engineering, and a trusted voice in the community, Reis. Hey, Joe, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
Doing well. Awesome. Hey, for those of you in the audience or that don't know Joe, maybe Joe, if you can introduce yourself real quick, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. I'm Joe. I don't know what to say. Write books, rant online, still practice data engineering, architecture, and so forth. Been in the space a long time. I think sometimes known as a recovering data scientist. So could probably unpack that a bit. But anyway, good to see you.
Awesome, wonderful. It's been a while since you invited me to your show. I think about a year and a half or so. So it's more than overdue to reciprocate.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Right. Now, folks, if you're just joining the stream, drop a comment in the chat where you're joining us from. I'm always curious to see how global our audience is. I know we moved this around a little bit from our usual spot. Usually we go live on Tuesdays at noon. Now it's 5. But I hope we have a good crowd. Or even for those of you that watch this as a replay, it's perfectly fine as well. Little plug, if you want to learn all about how you can lead AI projects in your business successfully, there's an awesome book, the AI Leadership Handbook. It's been out for a couple of months now. You can pick that up on aileadershiphandbook.com. And like I said, learn more about how you can run these projects successfully. Now, obviously super passionate about how we can help folks in the community do that better. And I think there's still a big need, but not just that side, right? The mental health side, obviously, as well. Making sure that we, don't overstretch ourselves. But before we talk about today's topic, should we play a little game to kick things off in good tradition?
I guess so. Let's do that.
So good. All right. So this one's called In Your Own Words. And when I hit the buzzer, the wheels will start spinning. We'll see a sentence, and I'd like for you to answer with the first thing that comes to mind and why in your own words. To make it a little more interesting, you only have 60 seconds for your answer. And if you're in the audience, feel free to play along with us too and put your answer and why in the chat as well. So Joe, are you ready for What's the Buzz?
Never been readier. Let's do it.
Okay.
Kidding. I have no idea what you're going to ask, but...
well. So if AI were a vehicle, what would it be? 60 seconds on the clock.
Oh, geez. I think it depends what country you're in. I think in America, definitely a Cybertruck. In Europe, probably a Fiat. Or a Peugeot, whatever.
Yeah. Well, maybe the Fiats are highly regulated and reliable or something, but the Cybertruck definitely resonates with me.
Or a Volvo, right? It's supposed to be safe, kind of bland. So, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. Good. So whatever your answer would be, again, put it in the chat. I'm curious. But so now, how do I make this? How do I build that bridge from cars to mental wellness? Let's see.
Let's drive over to the destination. There you go.
Yeah, look, it can feel a lot like going on the German Autobahn, and even if you feel you're going 140, there's a car behind you going 160 and flashing the high beams, and you need to move over. So
Autobahn is fun, though, I will say.
Yeah. It is fun. It can also be stressful, right? Much like a tech job, and I feel that the industry is in overdrive. It's been in overdrive ever since this thing, ChatGPT, obviously popped on the map. And business leaders, tech leaders said, wow, what's this? We need to do something. What's our AI strategy? What have we been doing all these years? Yes, we have some AI or machine learning, but we didn't see this coming. Right? More and more announcements, advancements. I mean, we all read the tech news in blogs. It's mind-blowing sometimes, even within a given week, how we jump from news and do all that hopping. But I also think it's really, really hard, right? When you talk to folks in the industry, nobody really wants to admit that they're behind. Internally, I think there's a big push in many of these organizations, not just software and tech, but across different industries. But I'm curious, what are you seeing when you talk to people? What's that sentiment?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I definitely talked to a cross section of people from some of the biggest companies in the world to, kind of small and everything in between. It is interesting. You do point out, I think, this kind of fake it till I make it approach. Or maybe it's not the right way of putting it, but I'll go with it for now. And yeah, it's there's definitely you got to put on appearances that you have a quote AI story. Your board expects it if you have a board. Your customers might expect it. I can get into what that actually and some nuance into that. But the expectation is, universal, obviously universally, but well, quasi is that the expectations are you're doing something with AI. You have some sort of a use cases, but it is interesting because I feel like this is, it's been ordained as a transformative technology of at least this decade, and we'll see about others. But the transformation part is something I've been very curious about. Like what, if you're, a regular tech company, for example, obviously there's probably more use cases for it to, you're probably already transformed your business because you're more probably AI or data native or digital native than maybe mature enterprises. But then the mature enterprises, I often wonder, what's the use cases that are really going to cause the transformations for these mature companies? Because if you kind of take a step back, right? And I wrote about this in one of my articles. Like, a lot of companies want to do AI, but most are barely doing BI. This is still the challenge for a lot of mature enterprises. It's not a knock. It's just you have the data systems that are pretty old. BI is still a challenge, and now we're going to throw LLMs and AI on top of these same data systems, and miraculously things are going to happen, right? So I think that's a disconnect that I see. Just I live in reality, so I think a lot of other we talk to technicians, especially practitioners, they're like, yeah. I think there's a difference between what maybe is on the the C-suite's slide deck for AI versus what's actually happening in the and it could be possible, just kind of given the current state of affairs. That's not to say, of course, that AI is not going to get traction, especially if we talk about kind of more mature enterprises. That there's use cases that probably don't directly involve a lot of the corporate data systems as they are. You could do customer support. That's a big one. That's like the lowest hanging fruit that I see is just augmenting people with AI or replacing them, whatever, with these solutions. So, but it's that's how it is. What are you seeing?
Yeah. So I was meeting with a few prospects over the last couple of weeks, and I saw a similar picture as well, right? AI is that shiny object, that trigger, which I think is already good because leaders realize, hey, we need to do something. We haven't done enough over the last couple of years, and we haven't been able to invest as much as we should have. Now we see there's AI. It's an opportunity. It's a threat. We need to do something. But then when you peel it back, it really comes down to data, processes, and systems, right? And actually business transformation at the very core. And
Yeah.
AI is an enabler. So that to me is still an eye-opening, conversation that you have when you're in the room with senior leaders, and they say, well, we're not quite sure where we're leaving money on the table, or we feel we're doing okay, we're doing better in some areas than in others, but we don't really have the data. But if we had, we could do so much more. So, right, what is step one then? Gathering that data and starting to gather it in a way that you can use it before you can then do AI. Right?
It is an interesting, I would say, conundrum that many companies find themselves in, because they've been told over and over from people like us and other pundits and people that like take your data seriously, be data driven, all these hooray type things. And guess what? They ignore it, say, well, we don't really want to invest in that. We want to invest in other stuff like my yacht or my Cybertruck or something. Just kidding. Or bonuses, right? And so but now I think but there's no free lunch here. You either make the investment or you don't.
Yes.
Right. Now, of course, that assumes that AI doesn't just miraculously heal your data and solve your problems for you, but we're assuming that that's not really the case right now. And you talk to any AI vendor as well that actually does stuff with enterprise, it's like the underlying data is always the crux, period, hands down.
Yes.
If the data is in great shape, if there's good data quality, if the data is well modeled, governed, whatever, terrific. If it's not, well, I suppose then you get to fix that. So
I agree, right? And by the way, that's where I think Gen AI, and whether it's Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, is actually a good tool or a good way to show why you need data, why you need good data and specific data. We've all had these first experiences when we've used these tools, that the output was okay. Hey, yeah, sure, it wrote something, but it was meh, right? It wasn't specific. It wasn't specific to what I needed.
yeah.
But once you recognize, hey, I need to give it more context, more data, or even more specific data, then I get better output. I think from a conversation with senior leaders who have used these early Gen AI tools, that makes a lot clearer why we need data again.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it goes back to, just data is everything at the end of the day, right? You're finding that um, even with very sophisticated algorithms and obviously very great hardware and so forth, the data is still the differentiator. Like it doesn't really matter what, the models are great. It's data that goes into it that matters at the end of the day. And so, and seeing as we've probably tapped out the publicly available data, all that's left is, what do you have in your company,
Correct.
right? And that's
But
where you're going to see the yields.
correct, but that's where the gold mine is, right?
The gold mine for sure. Yeah,
But
yeah.
also a little bit the dirt mine.
Well, it might be a mine of mud. You don't know
Yeah,
what you don't know what you're dealing with. I think it depends on, and here's the thing too. It's I would say that there's a big race, but like all races that you enter, right? There's people that are going to be storming ahead. If you've done 5Ks, there's always that person that finishes in like 13, 14 minutes. There's the other people that finish in, I don't know, 90 minutes, right? So we're all racing, but a lot of it depends on how did you start the race out?
that's true.
Not everyone's, it's not an equal, there's no such thing as everyone's going at the same speed with this thing. Not at all.
No, definitely not. Now, I remember a couple of weeks ago you posted about this topic, especially the mental health burnout type topic, and I think first of all it's fantastic that you do talk about topics like that, because a lot of our peers that are in full-time roles are afraid to speak out, right? And are afraid to say, hey, I raise my hand. It's too much, right? Just catching up and continuously catching up and more and faster and shipping product all the time, announcing new products, marketing products all the time gets exhausting. And we're only 2 years in, right? How much longer is this going to go? And is that the new pace? So I met with a former colleague before the holidays, by the way, and they shared, hey, it's an incredible opportunity to be in tech at this time of AI innovation, but beside it being so humbling and a once in a career opportunity, it's also unsustainable because it's unsustainably stressful. So I'm curious, what are you seeing? What do you recommend? How can tech leaders and professionals balance the passion with those high expectations that are in the market without burning out?
That's a big question. I think it's one of the biggest questions of our time right now. I think you're simultaneously seeing, record corporate profits and revenues and valuations and so forth. At the same time, at these same companies, even you're seeing record amounts of burnout, record amounts of layoffs. Right? Some big ones were announced. Just happened today. Actually, I have friends who were part of I think several thousand people got laid off at one of the big Magnificent Seven companies. Right. At the same time, I also saw another group of friends were laid off at small companies today alone. And this is constantly the thing I keep seeing. So you want to talk about anxiety first, like, you lose your job. That sucks. That makes you anxious. But then imagine being at these same companies where, they do these layoffs. They're expecting more out of you. They're almost eager to talk about layoffs now, whereas I think in the past, 10 years ago, right? You had all the accoutrements that you wanted in your office. You had a Seuss, you had, if you're in big tech at least, could play video games. I mean, it was like daycare for adults. And Now it's, but they wanted to treat their employees really well. I don't say it disparagingly, daycare. It was like this is just awesome, right? And so you fast forward today, and it's like gloves are off. It feels like there's almost an animosity that employers have towards their employees, and that's the biggest change that I've seen. And what this means is people go to work, they're stressed, they're expected to do a lot more with a lot less resources, a lot less people, probably with a lot less compassion than they had, earlier on. And so this manifests itself into just I think gobs of stress, right? I mean, how do you feel in that kind of situation? You don't feel like anyone has your back anymore. And then it kind of turns to kind of the Squid Game or Game of Thrones kind of thing where you don't even know who's going to turn on you at any second, who's colluding behind the scenes. Because in environments like this is exactly what happens. People, because what happens is it manifests itself into the behavior of the coworkers too. And they're like, well, companies, obviously not sending a signal they care. I maybe in my immediate group, I care about them, but it's like everyone's for themselves at this point. I've seen it happen personally, many, many times. And I see it happening to my friends right now. I don't have a day job. I don't really want one, for precisely the reason that if I get into it, first I limit my opportunities. Second, I'm going to be stressed out. Like it's, to me, it's a no-win situation given where I'm at in my career. But, for other people that are in that situation, they can't say the same thing. They have to be muzzled, like you were saying, and like keep a straight face. And all the while, right now with AI, I expect to do much more and much more. I keep marching towards this goal. And it's the Red Queen effect that if you've read Alice in Wonderland, right? It's basically you run faster and faster to stay in the same place.
Yes, right.
Ideally, you're running faster and faster to go towards a goal, or in the case of the Autobahn, driving faster. But like, it's just more and more work. And hope. I mean, for God's sake, I hope AI shows up and like solves a lot of these problems and like alleviates a lot of the pressure, because it's just this isn't. It's actually on a walk just before this. I was reading a really good book called Offline Matters. It's about just deplugging from digital, just the constant stress of digital online work. And, and I was thinking, what's the nature of, like, why do we do this to ourselves? And it was separate from our conversation, but I was walking like, modern knowledge work. Is this really what we were, because I was walking my dog and I was like, what does my dog think? I often think this because I'm kind of dumb. It's like, what goes through her head? No, the only thing I can think of is she's just excited to be outside, hanging out with me. But then I look at what we get stressed out about. And I'm like, why? Like, what is it? What is this all for?
And I mean, if you look especially at the corporate world, right, for a long time, you would say, hey, corporate jobs are stable. You have a regular and stable income. Look for good companies or growth companies or companies that have been around for a long time. And then precisely what you share, right? There are layoffs in tech and in other places, especially as well. And if that happens on your team, you look around and you say, well, if it happens, or if it happened to that person and it happened to that person, well, who's to say that it doesn't happen to me or to my other really good work friends or colleagues? And I think that is one of the stressors for sure.
Oh, big time. I mean, it's I always equate it to if you're in World War I, for example, like you're in the trench, like you don't know who's going to be around tomorrow, right? And so, but that's morbidly kind of how it is these days. I mean, that's just reality. I'm not trying to be melodramatic about it. In fact, I'm probably being like under dramatic in some ways, but it's just like that. Like I know execs right now, a lot of the big companies who are planning reorgs right now. I'm not going to say which ones, but I know what's going on, and this is happening a lot right now. Not announced yet. Yeah.
And then you have a couple of weeks of uncertainty. Let's figure out who we are, what we do, but keep doing what you have been doing until we hear from the top what is really going to change, and a lot of uncertainty, especially at the beginning of the year, as always.
Yep.
Now, I would also see that, again, if things like agentic AI become more prevalent, even more robust, if they permeate large organizations, that there will be even more, more stress and more change. And again, for me, that hinges on the fact that the technology is robust and enough organizations use it without adversarial side effects. So let's assume that happens, and to me that is still in the phase where it's being proven. But if that happens, I think it also gets very stressful at a leadership level, right? All of a sudden, you'll get targets. Well, you won't be able to backfill. It's already the reality in many organizations today. But if you're not downsizing or reducing the headcount, you cannot backfill if someone leaves. But you can backfill with agents or with technology that is cheaper, that runs 24/7, that ideally runs at least as reliably as humans do. And then guess what? We might also cut your budget. Instead of 10 million, you have 5 million. The other 5 go towards some automation. Now, you lose budget, you lose people. In our old thinking, you lose influence, right? Especially if these kingdoms, organizational kingdoms, have been built around people, around having large organizations, larger responsibilities, large budgets. And that's what determines, again, who moves up. I think it'll be a big change, not just for individual contributors, but for leaders as well.
It's interesting. So I've been kind of thinking two thoughts about this. One is that there's definitely a situation where frontline workers, ICs, basically, get augmented, we'll say, with agents. It can be code for a lot of things. If you invert it, though, and if you look at the nature of work, in fact, I see the middle management actually getting affected maybe more quickly than frontline workers, because the frontline workers know the work, and they can guide the agents in ways that the managers probably can't. Historically, management, if you go back to the beginnings of sort of modern day management, when it was in the industrial age, it was to manage the output of workers. But you take it a step down now, and if the workers understand, because again, these agents will be probably for a bit sort of like managing I don't know, unruly workers. I can't imagine they just like come out of the box and just do great work. But over time, through reinforcement learning, for example, they can do great work. And so the flip side of it, I can actually see a scenario where middle management gets, they actually get reduced because the frontline workers actually can manage more and more agents because they know the work better and they're just closer to the metal. So that also could be a possibility.
Right. And so, I think to some extent, we see that in multi-agent systems. If you have a coordinator or a supervisor agent that manages and reviews the output of several others, that's one of the core definitions or tasks of management. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So this is like one of the most fascinating thought experiments right now is sort of like what does the nature of an organization look like with AI. Another thing I've been talking about in the last couple of weeks, and well, I've talked about this for a while, but 2 conversations in the last 2 weeks, is just a notion that if individually we have our own agents and we have the ability to farm out our work, so to speak. Well, what's to stop us from, I guess, renting out those agents to other companies and being employed by multiple companies? And that's something I've been really pondering, is sort of the nature of what does work look like? Like, why do you have to be tied to one company? There's nothing in the Bible that says you have to be monogamous to like one company. That's not in there. And so, it's a thought really that, you had sort of the phenomenon, especially during COVID, where people were working multiple jobs and making a ton of money. But I think this is actually going to be the reality. It's sort of the gig economy, but I guess you call it the agent economy, where, if you have a bot finely tuned to your skills and personality and so forth, and that works with, other bots, then, maybe that's it. But it also makes me sort of wonder long term, what is even the nature of a company in that situation? Why can't you just band together to solve a problem, which is the nature of a firm under Robert Coase back in the day? The nature of a firm is to solve a problem and create customers. But if that whole paradigm inverts itself, I could actually see something very different. So, but we're a ways from that.
Yeah, luckily, right? And I don't want to have our conversation take a dystopian view, but I think
I think it's an optimistic view, actually, because if you have the agency to go out and do your own thing, and rent it to the to the highest bidders, not just singular bidder, perhaps it's a good thing, right? So, you can infinitely scale yourself.
Right, cool. And I think if you start from the entity of a company and you say, directionally, it will be augmentation. It will likely be some replacement. So what do you do then as an individual who's affected by that change? Either you need to work fewer hours because you're being augmented, but we don't have a 40-hour work week for you. We have a 20-hour work week for you. well, if you can scale through agents again or through technology, there are 2 companies or 3 companies you work for, and to your point, you can scale your knowledge through agents in
Oh
that
yeah,
sense, and make that same income ideally, but through multiple jobs.
that's just it. Why not just have a 24/7 getting,
Yes.
since you're not doing any of the work. Like the 40-hour work week came about because of labor negotiations, remember, right? So I mean, people used to work at nonstop at factories, and then that was kiboshed and put to 40 hours because under, I think it was Henry Ford, just because it's I don't know, probably not healthy if you want to have good labor relations. But that was also at a time when Ford was very considerate of the long-term impacts of factory employment on the employees, and he was very conscious of this. That's why he paid people well and treated them well, so they would produce better output. But that was over 100 years ago, right?
Yes.
And we're still using that same mode for today. But it's no wonder people are stressed out, because again, on my walk, I was just thinking, what is the nature of knowledge work these days? Like, why? Like this wasn't what humans, we weren't supposed to be like sitting at a desk typing away at a keyboard. Like this I think this is like a transition point to something else. But anyway, that's a book for another
Yeah. No.
decade. So,
But that makes me wonder. Then, on one hand, leaders are either already under this kind of stress or will experience it. ICs are definitely under the stress. That yes, I have a permanent role as long as my employer wants me there.
yep.
How permanent is that? Semi-permanent? When does that run out? How do you feel leaders can then prevent the team from burning out, especially in these high pressure situations where, hey, we're behind, we need to innovate, we need to do new stuff, maybe we need to do a lot more foundational work before we can even do the new stuff,
Yeah.
but we need to do it faster, and we need to catch up all that time that we've not utilized or not spent well over the last couple of years. So how can leaders help their team from burning out?
Well, I mean, there's the old saying, right? People don't leave their job; they leave their manager. I think that's
Yes.
really true. So I think things that I've seen effective, at least, and from my experience, and talking to lots and lots of people, is that when a manager or a leader makes their team feel valued, when they take the time to give them attention, to be compassionate, to get to know them as people, I think that's
Yeah.
that's a really good way to stave things off, because you have a personal connection with your team, right? Like I had one friend today who was laid off, right? And he told me that how he got laid off was very cold, very clinical, not even a thank you,
Hmm.
right? That says a lot about that company, right? And so I would say that's being cold and clinical isn't going to get you any favors. It's going to get you output, and if that's all you care about, go for it, right? But if you want to develop a team and a culture, there's a lot more to it. And but this isn't easy. This isn't easy to do. It requires that you do the things that aren't scalable. It means going and talking to people and like understanding what makes that person tick and so forth. But I think it's things as quote simple as that. But also playing blocking and tackle for your team, I think is a big one. Like, but you can only shield your team so much from what's going on, and I think the big thing is, especially in big companies, is nobody seems to know what's going on. Like, I'm sure you know how this goes. It's you think you know what's going on, you hear rumors and stuff, but it's there's a lot of information asymmetry that happens, and so that's just reality, for better or for worse. But that's just kind of how it is. So yeah, I don't know, but I would say just do the best you can. Just be a person at the end of the day. That's who I want to relate to and feel like I can get behind as a person who is just a person, right? If you're going to come to me and talk to me in cold clinical terms, or corporate speak, even worse, try and be all jolly but talking in just like nonsense, corporate BS, then like I don't have respect for that. I don't have time for that either. But yeah, so
I love that, right? Especially in that time and age of more AI, more machines, more automation, fewer humans in the end. To some extent, be human, be human towards the people that you work for, that work with you. I think that's a very, very good call to action.
yeah, and I would say that holds true with or without AI, right? Like you don't have to like wait for the robot apocalypse to be nice to your people. It's just something you should be doing, because ideally that's the role of a leader and a manager, is it's leading people. But to me, that also means just being a person, right? Which is hard to do, I think, for a lot of corporate people. I think it's hard to do because you're so used to muzzling yourself. You're so used to, as you say, your friends that you talk to them. And I see this especially at big companies. You gotta put on the face. You gotta put on the act. You're partly hired for your experience, partly hired for your brains, but I think you're also hired to conform to this sort of this LARP, this acting role that you have to have, which is is what it is.
So we covered a lot of topics. We covered a lot of ground over the last half hour. And Joe, I was wondering if you can summarize the key 3 takeaways for our audience out of all the things that we touched on, burning for AI without burning out.
Going backwards, I would say, if you're a leader, be a human, be a person. That also includes individual contributors, by the way. Just be a person. That's the one thing I think people sacrifice too often. That they look back and they're like, where did I spend my time? So that's a big one. The other one is just try and find ways to put your data house in order, so AI is good to go. But I think finally, just figure out ways where AI is going to have the most impact for your company, right? We sort of danced around this a bit, but find ways where you can do it in a humane way as well, right? I think that's the thing that's missing from the conversation is, how can we get rid of all this cost, right? How would you feel if I called you cost? That's your pronoun.
Are you asking me as an individual or as a shareholder?
Yeah, it's a good point. So when you as an individual, when you refer to as cost, you're like, that's pretty inhumane.
Cool.
As a shareholder, you're like,
asset. So asset is the right word, not cost. Asset.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Hey, well, we're getting close to the end of the show, and Joe, I just want to say thank you for joining us and for sharing your expertise with us. I'm glad we're able to have that conversation. Like I said, it's so much easier having it with someone who's seen it, who's been through it, who has lots of connections to people who are going through that. Because I know that a lot of folks in corporate roles, in full-time roles, cannot speak so openly about the challenges.
I understand, man.
So
it is what it is. Yep.
Yes. Wonderful. Again, thank you so much for coming on the show. And everybody, see you next time for another round of What's the Buzz?
See y'all. Bye.